Hey, good afternoon, church family. It's Tuesday once again, the day of the week where I try to reach out a little bit in this format here in a video. And today I'm standing here in our sanctuary, and I hope you all miss meeting in here as much as I do. And I'm looking forward to the day again that we can meet together in here again. The circumstances in our world, I don't need to go into detail. You all know, and we're all, if you're feeling at all like me, you're feeling a little bit sick and tired of everywhere you go, everything you turn on and look at has to do with this COVID-19, and it gets exhausting and it gets tiring, and there's other things going on, and it'd be sometimes nice to focus on other things. Having said that, we shouldn't downplay the fact that the rubber is hitting the road for many people. It's hard to say that this has not impacted everyone in some way. Even if I just think about people who have weddings planned, and kind of everything is up in the air, and the stress and anxiety that brings them. People that have had funerals. I know of one last week, and you can only gather 10 people. So how do you do that? And then you live stream it, but the people that live around you, their immediate family, how can you keep them away from going to their loved one's funeral? Those are very real things that are happening right now. And of course, some of the obvious things, people losing jobs, financial difficulties. And then there's the whole anxiety and stress and depression that a lot of people wrestle with, which are very, very real battles. And we need to take that into consideration and be in prayer for those people and support them and encourage them. So the rubber is hitting the road for everybody. I don't think there's anybody that can say it's not. And I think it would be ignorant to say that it's not. This is what's going on in our world. If you would have been alive during World War I or World War II, living in Germany or living in those areas where the war was going on, even if you weren't directly in the battle, even if your family wasn't in the military, you heard the gunshots. You lived with the fear of a bullet possibly coming through your house. And so it was a part of your life. And so that has become the reality for the whole world and for all of us. But that does not mean that need to live in fear, especially as Christians. We know that there's more to come, and we know that God is at work. But with all this, there have been restrictions put in place, and this is not, I'm sure this is not new information for anybody, but just in case it is, as a church, some of the decisions we've made in the last days and weeks are because of some of these regulations. So in case you haven't heard, the latest that I'm aware of, or that we're aware of anyway, is that gatherings are restricted to 5 or less people. And even with those gatherings, it's immediate family living together. They are strongly discouraging any socializing outside where there's physical contact outside of your immediate family. And Mount Salem Community Church did an interview with their OPP officer in their church, Pete Simons, last week, brainstorming with him, asking him some questions, and he confirmed that depending on the officer and the circumstance, they do have the authority to lay down fines up to $750 for individuals who are intentionally not adhering to this. So it's a real thing. And as Christians, we're called to obey our government. We see that in Romans 13. And as long as we're not being told to not worship God, as long as what the government is asking us to do is not in contradiction with God, then we are called to obey. And I would venture to say that the government is not challenging our faith or challenging our worship, because our worship is not hindered just because we can't meet in this building. Our worship and our faith should go much, much deeper in that. And I think of this, our EMC conference sends out updates every week. And in their update last week, they referenced Dr. Glenn Clausen. He's a geneticist in the Fort Garry EMC church in Winnipeg right now. And he has written about pandemics like this. And he wrote about the Spanish flu that went through the world in 1918. And he talks about how in southern Manitoba, where there were large communities of Mennonites who did not heed the instructions of the government to social distance, they continued worshiping at the time. And I don't know whether they laid any charges or fines, or whether the government actually says they weren't allowed to, but it was discouraged. And the Mennonite groups continued worshiping anyway. And these are just the statistics now in hindsight. In the Mennonite communities, the death toll was exactly double what it was in many other communities where there were non-Mennonites and where, or maybe we could say non-church, not as many church-going people. And so just a bit of a reference for us. But what does this all mean for us? We need to ask ourselves, what is God teaching us in this time? When this is all over and we get together, right now we're feeling the emptiness and the void, and we're feeling how things are not as they should be, and they're not. But you know what? That is the biblical story. Look through the biblical story. When were things as they should be? We could argue that in North America, for the last 50-ish years, 60-ish years, maybe 70, things have been better in the world than they have ever been. We've had economic stability for the most part, social stability, political stability. We've had it all, but this has become so much the norm for us that we take for granted that for many people it never has been. And look at the biblical story, look at history. Just ask yourself this question. Was the Apostle Paul not able to worship in spirit and in truth as he was sitting in a prison cell writing to many of the churches? Were our brothers and sisters in the early church that were persecuted, that fled from Jerusalem, spreading it all over the world, known world at the time, were they not able to worship as they were hiding in caves and fleeing for their lives? And they were probably in seasons just with their immediate families so that they wouldn't get caught in too big of groups. Do we think they weren't worshiping? What about in the Reformation time, 500 years ago, when the Reformation broke out and persecution against Christians broke out again, and even against our Anabaptist forefathers, where there were people murdered and killed, and persecution? What happened? Did they worship? What about modern day in China, communist countries, or in the Middle East for decades now? There's been restrictions against Christians and persecution. And these are all instances where there's direct persecution against Christians. And brothers and sisters, do we think that God was not at work? Look at those times, all of them that I just suggested, reminded us of. The church grew and became stronger than it ever had. People got saved. People were followers of Jesus, and they recognized what it meant to follow Jesus at any and all costs, and willing to give their lives. Has it really sank in for us what it means to follow Jesus? This discomfort, this void that we're feeling right now, my hope and prayer is that it leads to us recognizing who we are in Christ, and that we are called to follow Jesus no matter what the cost. And so be it for a time now we can't publicly gather, but we can worship. We can worship potentially better and deeper and more than maybe we ever have, as we recognize who King Jesus really is and what he did for us on the cross, and what it means for us that he resurrected from the dead, and that we have been given life, that he died for your sin and for mine on the cross, that he resurrected to a new life, and he offers that to us. Maybe this is a time where we can stop taking for granted what it means to follow Jesus and to be a disciple. And brothers and sisters, as much as we love this building and love our church programs, you know what Jesus' model for the church was? When God in the flesh walked this earth, when he was discipling his disciples, his followers, what was the model that he gave? He didn't say, go find a building to purchase or go build a building and then find programs and invite the people to come in and develop programs that will be inviting to the community and then do church. No, he said 2 by 2, go out and make disciples. That's what we are called to do. God has given you gifts. He's given me gifts. You know, when the church is in a time of crisis, these structures that we know, these systems and programs that we know, all of a sudden we recognize what luxuries they were. So my hope and prayer is that when we get together again, that we will recognize what we have been given, and that we will be more unified than ever, that we will worship King Jesus more than ever as a whole body and family, and that we won't wait till then, that we are doing it now already in our homes and with our families individually, but that we will recognize what we are called to, and that we would be willing to give our lives for following Jesus. Brothers and sisters, the story is not over. We know how the story ends. And no matter what happens between now and then, when the story does end, when Jesus comes back, Jesus is Lord. He is sitting on the throne. This Easter weekend, we celebrate the gospel story. We celebrate what Jesus did for us. And with that, I want to leave you with a reminder. Good Friday morning, we plan to do a live stream, Willie and I. We're excited but nervous about that. Tune in. There will be details to come. There will be a link posted on the church WhatsApp and the social media for that. And we plan to start that at 10 o'clock sharp Friday morning. So tune in for that. God bless you guys. Have a great day.